So my name's Kim, I'm one of the social workers at Adoption in Merseyside, and I work for the recruitment and assessment part of the service. So we basically recruit new adopters and we will assess adopters from stage 1 right through to being linked and matched with a child or children. So Adoption in Merseyside are a regionalised adoption agency. We've been Adoption in Merseyside since 2018, so we cover 4 local authorities within Merseyside. We cover Liverpool, Wirral, Sefton and Knowsley. So Adoption in Merseyside does everything adoption related as part of the local authority. We start from the very beginning, so we recruit people who are thinking about adoption. That might just be answering some questions that people have got about adoption. If people call our duty or if they attend an information webinar, there's absolutely no expectation that they're going to progress. At that early stage, it might just be about wanting some more information, gathering some more info and making the decision to move forward. So that would be the very beginning and the very front door of what we do. From that point, if people do want to move forward, we then attend and do an initial visit, and then we decide, based upon the information shared within that visit, whether we're going to progress to stage 1 of an assessment. From stage 1, you then progress to stage 2. So the whole process usually takes, on average, around 12 months. And within that, we complete a really robust assessment where we will find out everything about you as a prospective adopter, and whether that's you as a single applicant or as a couple. We look at your support network, which is a really important factor within the assessment. And we look at your expectations and what strengths and what vulnerabilities you have as a family, and we put that all together into a prospective adopters report. We then are involved in the linking you with a child or with children, and taking you forward to be matched with that child right through to the making of an adoption order. Post-adoption order, we've also got our adoption support side of the service, which support families who've adopted children right through up until those children are adults. So there's quite a lot that Adoption in Merseyside cover. And that just means that as a regional adoption agency, we've got links with the children's team within those local authorities. So we've got links to social workers within Liverpool, Knowsley, Sefton, Wirral, and we are made aware of when children are going to have a plan of adoption and once they've got that plan of adoption. We've also got, as well as regional adoption agencies, you've also got voluntary adoption agencies. They differ slightly to us because they aren't part of the local authority, so they don't necessarily have the same links with the local authorities that regional agencies have. So they won't have the same links to the children's teams and wouldn't have necessarily the knowledge and the links that we have, early on, learning about which children are going to have plans of adoption. I'd say another characteristic that we feel is imperative within our prospective adopters and our adoptive families is an openness and honesty. Not only to the assessment itself, because that's really important. We will be, as your worker, we will be completely transparent, open, respectful and honest with you, and we expect the same in return. So we will talk about, throughout the assessment, maybe quite difficult things from your life and from your past, and we understand that that can be quite sensitive, and we will do that as sensitively and as respectfully as possible. We just ask that you are open and honest throughout, but also post-assessment, we expect an open and honest approach to adoption with your adopted child or children. So I'd say openness, honesty and open-mindedness are really, really important characteristics for our adoptive families. It's really broad, so we say anybody can adopt. Obviously there are things that would rule people out, and as I mentioned, that might be that if there's serious offences within a person's past, particularly offences that around children, if you've not lived in the UK for 12 months and if you're under 21. Apart from that, I would say there's very little that would completely rule people out from adopting, but it may be that that's not to guarantee that people will move forward, because it may be felt that actually it's not the right time for you at the moment, but that will be made very clear to you at that time when you apply. In terms of the type of people who can adopt, I would say, it's very broad. We have families from a whole host of backgrounds. We have single adopters, we have couples, we have heterosexual couples, we have same-sex couples, we have adopters who live with other family members. So it may be that an adoptive parent lives with their own parent, so there would be a grandparent within the home, and we include them as part of the assessment. We have adopters who have existing children within their family, whether that's birth children, whether they've adopted before or care for another family member. We have adopters from different parts of the world. We have adopters from all over. We have adopters of a completely ranging in ages. So we've got adopters varying from quite young to older, and there's no age restriction. There's no upper age restriction on adoption. I think a common misconception within adoption is that you've got to have a certain amount of savings put away. That's not the case. We hope that adopters feel comfortable to ask the questions to social workers early on. Financially, there isn't an expectation that you've got a certain amount of savings put aside, and we just hope that you can evidence that you are financially comfortable enough to be able to care for a child comfortably in terms of finances. Adopters from different backgrounds, different race, different religions, and we have adopters who have various disabilities and potentially ongoing illnesses. As part of the adoption assessment, you will go through a adoption health check, and that will be with your GP, and that will go through to one of our paediatricians who do the adoption health report. So we would explore anything health related within an assessment. So I would say for that not to put people off, because there's very little that will completely rule people out health-wise. So we've got adopters who come from a whole host of financial backgrounds as well. I think a common misconception within adoption is that you need to be from a particular financial background or economical status, and that's not the case. We want adoption to be inclusive, and we want, adoptive parents from a whole host of different backgrounds. There's not a sort of a particular figure that we want people to have put aside in terms of savings. Sometimes people come forward to adopt and they might not have any savings put aside. Sometimes people do have a little bit more money put aside. Either way, we just hope that you can evidence that you are financially stable and comfortable enough to be able to look after a child or with children. So the adoption process on average is around about a 12-month process from coming through the front door, introducing yourself and being allocated a social worker, right through to being approved at panel. That can differ family to family and on a case-by-case basis, depending on what your situation is. But I would say around about 12 months is about average. So you have your initial visit, and then a decision is made about whether you will progress to stage 1 of the assessment. Stage 1 can vary greatly because it would completely depend on how many checks, references, and what sort of your background looks like in terms of the checks and the references that we have to undertake. Within stage 1, we ask for checks, DBS checks, local authority checks. We ask for an adoption medical to be taken. We get references from families, friends, any ex-partners. What does the matching process look like? And again, that can differ greatly depending on your situation, how long your assessment takes, what you're willing to consider in terms of children, the type, the age, the number of children that you're considering as a family. So what I would say is the matching process we've got within Adoption in Merseyside, we've got our recruitment and assessment team, and we've got our family finding team. We work really, really closely with the family finding team. So it's their job. They are allocated a child or a sibling group, and they will look within the approved pool of adopters we've got within Adoption in Merseyside, or people who are coming up to be approved soon. So we work really closely with the family finding team, who will share profiles for children, which we will then consider and share with our families. And that's how we make those early links and potentially move forward to be officially matched with children. Within an assessment, we will talk from the beginning about what your expectations of being an adoptive parent are. So sometimes people will come through with the expectation of hoping to be linked with one child, and that might change throughout after various learning and conversations with the social worker. Sometimes people might extend that criteria to potentially a sibling group. Again, it's things to think about in terms of the age of the child, the background characteristics of the child in terms of birth history and what they might have experienced even pre-birth. So there's a whole host of topics that we cover in terms of what you're willing to consider as a family, but also what your strengths are and what your vulnerabilities might be, and what we feel you could manage in terms of a child and their background history, the birth family history, and what their plan will be moving forward in terms of the birth family as well. So we think about things like contact, what that's going to look like for a child and how you'll manage that. Within an assessment, there's plenty of training that is offered through Adoption in Merseyside, and the mandatory training is stage 1, or what might be referred to as preparation training. That's 3 days covering, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of adoption. So we cover a little bit about why children have a plan of adoption, what might have led to that decision being made, a little bit about the background of some of our children who come to be adopted. We talk about what contact and keeping in touch with birth family might look like. We have guest speakers come in to talk about their own experiences, some of the highs and lows and some of the challenges and some of the joys of being an adoptive family, which people always enjoy. We also talk a little bit about attachment and some of the brain science of and therapeutic parenting and what that might look like in practice. So we've got a whole 3 days, very whistle-stop tour of what adoption is. We also have a mandatory 1-day fostering for adoption training, which covers what fostering for adoption or early permanent placement might look like. And that's 1 day, and we've also got stage 2 training, which again is a day, and that covers a little bit more deeply into therapeutic parenting, attachment, and some of the brain science behind why we recommend therapeutic parenting. So that's for our adoptive families. For support networks, which is really important, we offer family and friends training, which is mandatory for at least the referees that you put forward, but is on offer for anybody who you think will benefit from that training. And that's a couple of hours either of an evening or a weekend for your family and friends to join and understand a little bit more about what adoption looks like and how they can best support you as a family. What I would say about that is that it's very rarely a no, it's usually a not right now, and this is why. However, if the decision is made to move through to stage 1, stage 1 of the assessment is a formal part of the assessment. You would sign a stage 1 agreement, which basically sets out all of the expectations of you as a family and as us as the adoption agency. Within stage 1, there is some mandatory preparation or stage 1 training. That is 3 days of training. There is a lot of sort of homework that you have to do, which there is a lot of support with if you do feel you need support with that. And there's also a lot of checks and references that go on in the background as well. So after stage 1 has completed, which can take a various amount of time depending on different experiences, different families, different checks and references that might need to take place. There's no guarantee that you'll move from stage 1 to stage 2 because it purely depends on what the outcome of stage 1 is, but that will again be made completely transparent and completely open and honest with you from your social worker. If the decision is made that everything has come back fine within stage 1 and the decision is made that the time is right for you to move to stage 2, you would then move into the actual assessment process itself. So your social worker will set out a stage 2 agreement and a stage 2 plan, and you will have a various amount of sessions with your social worker that will be pre-agreed in terms of dates and times, and your social worker would use the homework that you've done in stage 1 in the All About Me assessment, in the All About Me report, and plus the information shared within visits, and that will be all put together into a prospective adopted report. Stage 2, we've tried to stick to a 4-month time frame, which can vary, family to family. Sometimes that might take slightly longer, depending on what happens within stage 2. And a prospective adopted report will be written up and sent to panel, and that is the document that panel will get. When you attend panel, it's then a case of there'll be a pre-agreed time and date for panel, and you will answer a few questions set out by the panel, which you'll be given sight of just before you answer the questions with your social worker. What I would say is for people to not worry about panel too much. I think panel is a source of anxiety for a lot of adopters, but what I would try and say to reassure people is that your social worker would never take you to panel unless they were sure it was going to be a positive outcome. Panel want people to be approved. We want families for our children. So I'd just ask that people feel a little bit reassured by that. Where a child is placed within a family prior to the making of a placement order. A placement order is granted by a judge in court who has decided that adoption is the right plan for this child. Fostering for adoption placements are usually if a family would prefer to be matched with a younger child or a very young baby, we ask families to consider fostering for adoption. So a plan of fostering for adoption would only be put in place if all of the professionals involved were as sure as they could be that the judge is going to make that placement order later on down the line. So when you are approved for placement of fostering for adoption, you will be approved as a foster carer for a specific child. So you wouldn't be approved as a mainstream foster carer. You'll be approved as a foster carer for a specific child up until the making of a placement order. But there's a full day training for fostering for adoption placements, but we do ask that people to consider that as an option for them as a family if they do wish to be considered, particularly for a younger child or a baby. We understand that the process it's intense. We hope that it's a very positive experience for families, but we also understand that there is a lot to it and it can be quite intense. We have a skilled team in supporting families with that journey. So we hope that families feel supported to be able to talk to the social worker, to open up to the social worker and to ask difficult questions and to share, sometimes quite difficult life experiences. So our team is skilled in supporting families through that. And we're also skilled in sort of supporting families from a whole host of different backgrounds in terms of what your family might look like and what your background might look like. So there's a lot of support in terms of practical support. It might be that people need some support with the writing up of the All About Me workbook and the paperwork. And it might be that sometimes families might need a little bit more support in terms of enhancing their own support network. We can put you in touch with other families who've adopted. If you say, for example, you want to adopt siblings, we can put you in touch with other families who've adopted siblings. So there's a lot of support, both practical, emotional, and a lot of advice available to adopters throughout the assessment process. Post-adoption, so once a child is placed, we have a whole team dedicated specifically to adoption support, and they can offer advice on the phone. They can offer training, and they can offer what's called the Adoption Support Fund, which is a pot of money that is agreed up until, I believe, 2025 up to now. And that will be applied for, which can offer specific therapeutic interventions for families who've adopted children. So there's a whole host of support in various capacities throughout, starting the journey right through up until your child is an adult. There's so much support available to adoptive families. So adoption support is available to all families who've adopted. What I would say on that topic is that sometimes families can feel a little bit anxious about approaching Adoption in Merseyside for support because they may feel they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They may feel like there's a little bit of a stigma around, failing and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. We would say reaching out and asking for support is seen massively as a strength. Adoption support is there for a reason, and they are so skilled in what they do, and I will guarantee that there's nothing they haven't heard before. So what we don't want is families to wait until they're at crisis point before they reach out and have to ask for emergency support. At the earliest convenience, you can be making a phone call to our adoption support duty. That might just be a phone call, or it might be where a referral's made and you might actually have an adoption support worker or one of our adoption support social workers come out and visit. And it may be that there's ongoing work, but there's so much support that adoption support offer. And what I would say is don't leave it until the last minute. Come at the earliest time when you recognise you might need that little bit of additional support. And that's what adoption support is there for. What I would say in terms of when you're matched with a child, each child needs something different from a family, and each child will benefit from something that your family's got to offer. So please don't feel that you are at a disadvantage if you are a single applicant, a same-sex applicant, or depending on your background. Please be open and honest about any worries or anxieties that you've got with your social worker, and I'm sure we could reassure you that you're not at a disadvantage depending on your background and your family make up.